Private Eye, 6 decades of jokes and journalism.
Welcome to Private Eye's spectacular celebration of ourselves. We're commemorating the 60th birthday of the magazine on October 25th, with a look back at the big historical events of the past 60 years as they were depicted in the pages of Private Eye. And we published this book, Private Eye, the 60 Yearbook, which is crammed with the very best of that coverage. We're doing a decade a day this week, so to start us off at the beginning, I'm going to hand over to Adam Macqueen, the editor of the 60 Yearbook, to give us a quick rundown of everything that happened in the 1960s. Adam, go.
So, okay, the Eye launched on October the 25th, 1961. It was edited by Christopher Booker, co-written and entirely illustrated by Willie Rushton. Their old school friend, Richard Ingrams, was kind of lurking around in the background doing bits and pieces until 2 years later, he launched a successful coup, ousts Booker from the editor's seat and takes over as editor. Peter Cook's also involved, but not from the beginning. Lots of people think he was involved from the beginning, but he actually comes in a little bit later on. Buys the magazine, brings in all sorts of groovy 60s celebrities like Dirk Bogarde and Jane Asher, who become shareholders in the magazine. And it surfs what becomes known as the satire boom, with programs like That Was the Week That Was, and all that, and the Establishment Club, and all things like that. But actually, that's a really, really small bit of the Eye's history, because all of that is over by 1964. And although it got this reputation for breaking things like the Profumo Scandal, it was actually more the tone of it rather than anything it actually revealed that kind of got that. Although it was the day that the Eye came out with a load of jokes about Profumo and Christine Keeler, that the question was asked in the House of Commons, to which John Profumo replied famously, "There was no impropriety whatsoever in my relationship with Miss Keeler." And there was an awful lot of impropriety. That was the lie that did for him, and that was why he had to resign. So you get a very, very corrupt Tory government under eventually the 14th Earl of Hume, which gets ousted. New Labour government comes in with Harold Wilson, and a lot of Private Eye readers who've loved this coverage are quite surprised to find out that actually it's an equal opportunities Mickey taker, and they're going to take the Mickey out of Harold Wilson and Labour as well.
And to help us look back at some of that, we're joined by 3 very special guests: Lewis Macleod, Harry Enfield, and Jan Ravens. Private Eye put its view of Parliament, the monarchy, and most of Britain's other established institutions on display pretty early on.
Queen opens Parliament.
And I hope you realise I didn't write this crap.
A joke repeated many times since. And long before anyone had even heard of Christine Keeler back in 1962, the Eye was covering another sex scandal, which involved a civil service clerk, John Vassall, who was arrested for spying for the Russians after being blackmailed by Moscow over his sex life. Private Eye provided the evidence against him, courtesy of one of his ministerial bosses.
The first time we realized that something was wrong was when someone noticed that every time our Polaris submarines put to sea, a fleet of Russian trawlers happened to be fishing for kippers just outside the harbour. But it must be admitted that this could have been purely coincidental. My own suspicions were rarely aroused when the British nuclear deterrent was one day found to have been mislaid. It was later discovered in a suitcase on the Moscow Underground and returned to our embassy there with a note reading,
"Can't think how this got here, Nikita."
We'd vetted Vassall, of course, but his job was really very unimportant. He was simply a sort of refuse disposal clerk in charge of burning all classified documents after use. So it took us a long time to latch onto him. But the fact remains that we did. When we discovered that he was making long-distance calls to Moscow in office time, we thought of taking him in straight away on the grounds that he was stealing official electricity and putting up our phone bills. But then we found that he was reversing the charges, and it was quite obvious that we couldn't really charge him until we were quite sure that he was leaking classified information. As soon as we were absolutely certain, of course, after a couple of years or so, on went the handcuffs, and there we are. A happy end, I'm sure you'll agree, to a very nasty story.
One of the earliest journalistic recruits to the Eye was top tabloid newsman Lunchtime-o Booze. Here he is in 1964, reporting on the dramatic rescue of Princess Margaret from a sinking yacht.
Last week, Princess Margaret narrowly escaped a watery grave. Had it not been for our mag's courage and leaping ability, the nation might today be swathed in black tulle. But today we spotlight a new peril. What is to stop the Queen from drowning? The answer? A disturbing nothing. When I put this question to palace officials, their report was negative in the extreme.
Her Majesty is a fine swimmer and completely at home in the water as she is on horseback.
That's as may be, Mr. Toffee knows no all, but what thousands of her loyal subjects are wondering is this. Would the Queen be equally at home if lead weights were attached to her body and gravity allowed to exercise its normal thrust?
Such circumstances are highly unlikely.
But those of us who remember being told that the Titanic would never sink will view this complacency with alarm. If the Titanic can sink, then so can our beloved royal family.
At the same time, the Eye was keeping a close eye on the groovy 60s pop scene and the eruption of Beatlemania, or in the case of the Eye's fictional rock and roll group, Turdmania.
I want you to meet four very young and exciting turds. They're from the new beat centre of Rochdale and they're swinging into the charts with their first waxing, Chain Stagger. Yesterday I popped into the studio and talked to them. The turds are something new. Irreverent, greedy, short and acneed. There is a trendy look about them that sets a 60s pace, as up-to-date as next year's Courage underwear. The leader of the group, Spiggy Topes, explained.
Actually, we don't have a leader. In our eyes, all turds are equal. And what I say is, about this beat business, well, I shouldn't think we'll be around in 100 years' time.
The turds started at the bottom and are already dominating the thinking of pacey people. I think the turds are going to be with us for a very long time.
That same year saw Harold Wilson arrive in Downing Street. Unfortunately for the Eye, his wife Mary Wilson agreed to share her diaries of life in number 10 with the magazine. Here in March 1969, she describes the reaction to the British colony of Anguilla declaring independence.
Where did you say it was?
Asked Harold, taking down the Reader's Digest Atlas of the Universe with revised moon maps from the tooled oak-style Maples Bookorama by the television.
Anguilla. Where are we? Ah, yes, here it is, just south of Madrid.
No.
Interposed little Mr. Stewart, the Foreign Secretary, fingering his tie nervously.
It is an island in the Caribbean, or so I'm informed by my experts on desk. It would seem that self-styled President Webster made a unilateral declaration of independence sometime in 1967. Might I suggest that we lodge a mild protest at the UN?
Wait a moment.
Harold replied, once more poring over the map.
Here we are, Anguilla, population 6,000. What's that you say? Protest? My dear Stuart, as you are no doubt aware, this week sees the 100th anniversary of the birth of Neville Chamberlain. Those of us who have lived through these troubled times will know full well the penalties that befall those who are prepared to compromise with dictators. Are we to stand idly by while evil men wave the mailed fist of derision at the forces of democracy and peace? This President Whitlock, who does he think he is?
President Webster, Prime Minister Webster.
Soothed the silver-haired satrap.
Whitlock, Webster, Nasser or Hitler, style themselves as they will, we know their type. If we give way, we shall pay for it later with millions dead and our cities devastated to rubble. Ring up Dickie Mountbatten and ask if he'd be interested in becoming Allied Supremo of an amphibious task force designed to bring this saber-rattling Mussolini grovelling to his knees.
Unfortunately, Lord Mountbatten was already booked for late-night lineup and was unable to accept. However, Mr. Healy came round from the MOD and was delighted at the suggestion, as it would give them a chance to try out the new Peewit inflatable hover tank. And the army, all 57 of them, were getting a bit bored sitting about in their luxury Butlin-style cookhouse on Salisbury Plain.
1969 saw two other major world events: man walking on the moon for the very first time, and Fleet Street's longest-serving woman columnist making her debut in Private Eye.
down to earth with Glenda Slag.
So President Nixon can call up the astronauts on the moon's surface 3 million miles away and be put through with scarcely a second's delay. But when I try to phone my editor and tell him I can't think of anything to write about, so is it all right if I churn out 2,000 words on come off it, GPO? What's wrong with Britain's telephones? I get an engaged tone. When I do get through, I'm told he's in the boozer and not on any account to be disturbed. Wake up, Mr. Editor. Wake up, Mr. Postmaster General.
And as protesters against the Vietnam War occupied London's Grosvenor Square and student rioters in Paris came close to toppling General de Gaulle's government, the Eye, not yet a decade old, proved just how in tune with the youth of the day it was.
Oh, vous, faire de couleur, ça suffit, le patron!
Let them smoke pot.
Private Eye, 6 decades of jokes and journalism. On sale now.